You are an uncaring woman. An old woman has no value in existence, so you should at least try not to bother others. Ross has always admonished me in this way. This Christmas, I will try to be perfect so as not to receive a scolding. As usual, I have prepared Christmas dishes for 30 people by myself, and everything is ready to welcome my husband's relatives. Meanwhile, Ross is just sleeping, snoring like a monster. Suddenly, I noticed a piece of paper by Ross's side. Divorce papers! Why? It even has my name on it. Somehow there was a divorce decree there, with all the columns filled in. Of course, I didn't write my name on it. If I left it like this, he might get angry at me again for not being smart enough. I'm supposed to file it, so I will. As a good wife, I had been devotedly supporting Ross. But I am not just an obedient woman. Ross's loud snoring stopped. A normal divorce wouldn't hurt Ross at all. So I'm going to put the finishing touches on him. Finally, the time has come. I am Jennifer Aniston, an ordinary housewife in her 40s with a 5-year-old son. Oh, I don't have cutlery. I'm sorry. I forgot to take them out. I'll bring them to you now. His name is Ross. He is my husband. Oh, so it's Indian style today. I wonder if I can eat it with my hands. And yet it's hot steak, how interesting. You'll have to take the blame if I burn my hands. 5 seconds passed before I offered Ross my cutlery. I smile softly at his joke. Ross and I got married 5 years ago when I was 35. We met on a blind date and got married after 6 months of dating. Ross works for a company owned by his father-in-law. It is a well-known company in the local area. In addition, his in-laws have been landowners for a long time, and they live in a very nice mansion. However, Ross and his parents do not take this to heart and seem to live like ordinary people, which made me feel good about them. On the other hand, my father died early and our family backgrounds were too different, but Ross told me, this is not the time to worry about such things. When the marriage was finalized, my mother-in-law got a little tearful and squeezed my hand. I'm glad you married Ross, my only son. Jennifer, let's get along with each other like a real parent and child. Ross was 40 years old at that time. His in-laws had recommended many blind dates, but they had been unsuccessful. His in-laws had given up hope that he would ever get married, and then I finally appeared on the scene. My parents have a stable income, my parents are wealthy, and I have a kind personality. I wonder why they never got married before. Let's have a big wedding. It's a special day for a girl to become a princess. I can't wait to see Jennifer in her wedding dress. I'm sure you'll be charming. A line that makes me blush comes out of Ross. I am so happy to have met him. I am a lucky woman. I felt that way from the bottom of my heart until during the wedding ceremony. The wedding went off without a hitch, and I was still in a flustered mood when I returned to the waiting room. I'm glad it was such a wonderful wedding. I still feel like I'm dreaming. I tried to lean on Ross's shoulder, but he quickly ducked away. Ross looked grim and brushed my head off his shoulder with his hand. What about you? You're not old enough to dream, are you? You should see the reality. Why don't you look in the mirror in front of you? How could you wear a dress with such a flabby face? Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You put a tiara on your head, don't you think you're a princess? Ah, ouch, 30-something is an old lady. Think about your age. Ross started to ramble on at once. It was hard to understand what he was saying. I stopped thinking and stiffened, keeping my smile on Ross's face. A week had passed since the wedding, and Ross and I had not spoken at all. Ross comes home from work almost always late at night and is unresponsive when I call out to him. The last I heard of him was that rant after the reception. Perhaps Ross is worried about his drunken and heartless rant and has been avoiding me. For a week, I have been troubled by his rant and Ross's attitude. Today, Sunday, Ross seems to be off. It was a good chance for us to talk, but Ross, who was playing with his phone on the sofa, didn't seem to see me. Then the intercom rang to announce a visitor. I checked the monitor and see my parents-in-law. I was surprised because I had not promised to visit them, but it would be a good opportunity for Ross and I to have a conversation. I gladly invited them in. So, when are you going to have kids? You're already in your 30s, so you'd better get on with it or you'll be useless. My mother-in-law said as she sat down on the living room couch. I was so stunned that I let the cup of tea I was brewing overflow. No, you stink! What are you spilling? Ross, who had been silent until then, laughed. You're only allowed to be a screw-up until you're a teenager. Anti-screw-ups? Even if you're trying to be funny, you're still a pain. Funny, you're right. Ross and his in-laws looked at each other and laughed happily. That's when I finally realized. This marriage was a mistake. Ross doesn't love me. But he wants to have children. He looked so disgusted and asked me out for a night. Even though I had liked him until recently, the way he asked me out made my feelings wane. But Ross didn't care about my feelings. A few months later, I became pregnant. Yay! I'm having a baby. The baby must be so sweet. I can't wait to hold it in my arms. Ross's cheeks blushed with joy. His unexpected joy made me happy, too. The truth is, I was a little nervous about getting pregnant. I wondered if I would be able to spend the rest of my life with Ross. But I had just gotten married with everyone's blessing, and now we were getting divorced, and even if we did get divorced, I wouldn't be able to rely on my parents. My fears were about to be put to rest when I became pregnant. The happy moment was short-lived. As soon as I became pregnant, Ross stopped coming home, as if he had done his job. It was common for them to come home late at night because they were busy with work. Sometimes it was all night. With a big belly, I had heavy morning sickness and could not move as much as I wanted to. I resigned from the company I had planned to return to after maternity leave. I endured the agony of being in a house all alone and feeling dazed. Nah, boy. I'm not interested in boy. After the birth, Ross showed up at the maternity hospital, but there was not a single word of congratulations. He had already known that his baby was a boy, but he had rushed to the maternity hospital in the hope that things might be different when the baby was born. After the birth, I was still all alone. I raised my son, Yuki, alone. My parents-in-law wanted a grandchild, but they did not adore Yuki. They were very annoyed that I had to take him to my parents-in-law's house once a month, but when I did show up, they wouldn't even try to hold him. They don't even prepare sweets for Tommy, and after a couple of hours, they kick him out saying it's time to go home. It's really a pointless and painful time. In the end, the in-laws just wanted Ross to get married out of concern for the world and wanted a grandchild. Also, as usual, Ross came home late at night, so he was never involved in any childcare. When Tommy was a baby, the unfamiliarity of childcare drove me crazy. Then, 5 years have passed since Tommy was born. Today, the family of 3 is living a settled life. After 5 years, those painful days seem like a long time ago. It was after 11 p.m. After Tommy goes to bed as usual, Ross comes home. Welcome home. I greeted Ross with a neat and tidy appearance, ready to go out at a moment's notice. You must be tired. I receive his bag and jacket at the entrance. As expected, I don't greet him with 3 fingers, but I do try to be a good old-fashioned wife and give Ross a good workout. You were a little earlier than usual today, weren't you? What? Is it bad if I come home early? Ross's plump and shiny cheeks puffed up even more. No way, I'm glad you're home early. While Ross is taking a bath, I fry up his favorite chicken. I don't want him to think about being sleepy or being lazy anymore. I want to make the house cozy and comfortable for Ross. Well, it doesn't taste too bad. Ross ate the chicken one after the other with a crunchy, light sound. Thank you. I'm happy you enjoy my food. The breadwinner of our family seems not to be too happy about it. Thanks to Ross, I am able to live a comfortable life. That is why I never forget to respect him. Ross raised his chin a little and lightly tapped the table with his empty glass. I wonder. I can't see the beer in the glass, but you can? What, maybe this is a beer that only honest people can see. Oh, I'm sorry. You were out of beer. I'll pour you one right away. I knew you were a wimp if you didn't notice it right away. Oil splashed from the chicken I was frying additionally. You're doing your job like that? There are people in my company like you. The mothers who are so busy with their children that they can't do their jobs are the ones who say, I'm taking the day off because my child has a fever, or I'm taking the day off because my child is having a field day. I feel sorry for the young girls who are forced to work for those people. Since Tommy was 1 year old, I have been working for a company that has a daycare center. Truth be told, I'd like to sleep now, and it's a huge burden to do housework, let alone childcare, before and after work. Even preparing the chicken was quite a hassle. I'll be careful. Yeah, you should realize that without being told. Old women are worthless, so we should at least try not to be a nuisance to others. Right. I put a smile on my face so as not to spoil Ross's mood, and poured a glass full of beer. Ross drank it all down in one gulp and shook his lower stomach with a good. The chicken made another slapping sound, spreading oil all over the place. Watch out, it's about to explode. After Ross goes to bed, I put away the dishes and his suit. I think I'm doing a perfect job of housework and childcare. No matter how late Ross gets home at night or how much lipstick is on his shirt, I wrap everything up with a smile. I am sure he will feel right at home with a hot meal, clean clothes, and a fluffy bed ready for him at all times. I'm aware of that, Ross. Well, there are only a few days left in this year. Christmas will soon arrive. I finished my work and started my Christmas vacation. I started as a part-timer, but since I finally became an employee this year, I have been very busy. I want to relax a little, but there is no time to rest during Christmas holiday. You should get ready for Christmas. There is a big Christmas gathering at Ross's parents' house every year. There are 2 or 3 dozen people, from children to the elderly, who gather there, and I am in charge of all the holiday meal preparation. Until I became a member of this family, my mother-in-law used to do this preparation by herself. So, I was not allowed to whine when I pleaded for help. When I was a new housewife, I really had a hard time. I heard that the holiday dishes my mother-in-law prepared were beautiful to look at and tasted first class. My relatives always looked forward to the gatherings, saying that it looked like a high-class restaurant. But when I took over, they were blatantly disappointed. In the past 2 or 3 years, I have finally gotten to the point where they say, it's homey and delicious. But Ross and my in-laws are not satisfied. Your food has a bad color at first. Your food has a poor taste. Can't you make it shiny like your mother's? My mother says that the soup stock is different from the ingredients. It may be difficult for a poor person who only knows about cheap food, but don't put me to shame this year. Yes. Finally, Christmas arrived. After carrying a large amount of food to the car, the family of 3 heads for the in-laws' house. Upon arriving at his parents-in-law's house, Ross quickly went to his room. His mother-in-law rubbed Ross's back as she followed him. You must be tired, right? You can sleep until everyone gets together. I'll lay out a futon for you, okay? My mother-in-law didn't even say come in to me and Yuki. It was Tommy, who was only 5 years old, who carried the food from the car into the house with us. With Tommy's help, our hospitality was soon ready. After taking a breath, I decided to leave my bag in Ross's room and headed there. Ross is sleeping, so I gently opened the sliding door. Ross was sleeping with a monster-like snore. I wondered how he could sleep again after sleeping at home until just before we left. What's that? I noticed a sheet of paper on a desk at the back of the room. I approached it with my footsteps, trying not to make a sound. I knew it was a divorce papers. Why? It even has my name on it. Somehow, there was a divorce decree with all the columns filled in. Of course, I didn't write my name on it. If you look closely, you can see that Ross's handwriting has somehow been changed, but it all looks like Ross's. He must have written them for me. If I leave it like this, He might get angry at me again for not being smart enough. I've been told to submit it, so I will. I was just about ready to put the good wife to rest and get my act together. What good timing. I folded the divorce papers and tucked them into my pocket. At that moment, Ross's loud snoring stopped. I check him under my breath. Don't worry, he's still sleeping. I immediately got into the car with Tommy and left my parents-in-law's house. An hour or so later, my phone rings. It's a call from an elderly relative. What's wrong with you? You didn't even show up on Christmas Day? If you're my family, you should at least give me a proper greeting. He scolded me for being insane for not attending the gathering. I was about to say, but my relatives kept on putting words in my mouth. You know, you don't even fulfill your duties as a wife and you look like a big shot. It's a troublesome time. You are lucky to have a mother-in-law. She never got angry at her daughter-in-law who neglected her responsibilities and bowed her head to everyone, asking them to forgive her. No one else has such a kind mother-in-law. You should be more grateful. My mother-in-law, who had a good outward appearance, apparently defended me without making me look bad. I'll forgive you for your mother-in-law's face, so you can come here now. Don't worry, no one is angry with you. You're sulking because you can't compete with your mother-in-law in cooking, aren't you? Don't worry, you've been cooking for decades and you'll get good at it. This year, you should try your mother-in-law's cooking and learn from her. It seems that all the holiday feasts I prepared were all made by my mother-in-law. But I am not going to keep quiet about that lie. I prepared that dish. Huh? You even tell such an obvious lie? You're a hell of a wife. Well, I'll be coming to see you now. After hanging up the phone, I went back to my parents-in-law's house. At my in-law's house, everyone is drinking and having a good time. I held Tommy's small hand and opened the sliding door of the room vigorously. Aw, Jennifer, you're here? My mother-in-law looks a little awkward. The meddlesome relative who had called earlier beckoned me over. You came all right, didn't you? Here, eat your holiday meal. It's really good. I know it's delicious, because it costs $2,000. What? I greet them loudly enough to be heard in every corner of the room. Merry Christmas, everyone! How is the taste of the food? Some people have said that my cooking tastes poor, so this year I have prepared a special meal. This holiday meal will cost $2,000. The room that had been bustling with activity quieted down. I decided that my cooking was not good enough to entertain our valued guests, so I ordered 5 sets of $2,000 holiday meals this year. It was a big splurge. Jennifer, what are you talking nonsense? My mother-in-law, who could not hide her agitation, appealed to me with her eyes, don't say unnecessary things. But I tilted my head. Don't you see why? Then, here's the receipt. I was about to hand my mother-in-law the receipt and a piece of paper with a printout of the website for purchasing, but I decided not to. I handed them to the middle-aged woman next to me, who was looking very interested in them. Well, it's really sold for $2,000. What does this mean? Hey, everyone, look. As I expected, the woman's face lit up. She said it was homemade, didn't she? Of course, the eyes were on my mother-in-law. Well, that's, My mother-in-law choked on her words, unable to come up with a good excuse. I hear that my mother-in-law's cooking is as delicious as that of a fine restaurant. You are all right. Because they are dishes purchased at a high-class restaurant. In the past, I had seen a picture of a splendid holiday meal that my mother-in-law had prepared. It was not at the level of what an amateur could make. It looked as if it was for sale. Or, rather, it was for sale. So I looked into it and found that it was the same as the holiday meal of a famous high-class restaurant. I apologize for the poor quality of my dish. Since it didn't seem to suit your taste, I prepared the same meal as my mother-in-law's, from a high-class restaurant. My mother-in-law usually chooses a $400 meals, but I decided on a $2,000 one because it looked even more delicious. My mother-in-law was shaking with a bright red face. Sitting there, looked up by all her relatives, and with nowhere to run, my mother-in-law covered her face with her hands and jiggled her legs.
Shut up! That's a lie! It's a lie from my vicious daughter-in-law.
No matter how much she screamed, it would only make her miserable. The older relatives stared at my mother-in-law with expressions of utter bewilderment. But the younger ones seemed to be dimly aware of the situation and held back from bursting out. My mother-in-law's ranting cries overlapped with giggles.
Hey! Your guts are rotten. Do you enjoy bullying my mother?
Finally, Ross took a bite out of me. He lunged forward and grabbed me by the chest without hesitation. He should be thankful that I prepared a lot of food and drinks for him, even though it wasn't home-cooked. Ross had no right to act so high and mighty when he threw all the preparations for the banquet into my hands. If Ross had paid even the slightest attention to me, he would have known right away that I was not busy cooking.
I'm ashamed to have such a woman as my wife. Get out now. I will leave even if you don't ask me. We are strangers now. What?
I just took out the divorce papers that were in your room. Isn't that clever? Ross rolled his eyes.
Did you process it? That was my feelings, or maybe I didn't mean it.
You wrote the divorce papers because you wanted to divorce me, didn't you?
No, it wasn't that. It was more like my sincerity.
I giggle. Anyway, the divorce papers that you wrote have already been filed. I will ask my lawyer for the division of property and other matters later. Also, the alimony for the affair.
What? Did you think I didn't know you were cheating on me? I'm not that insensitive. Well, goodbye.
I quickly abandoned Ross, who had filled out the form himself and was forever cringing. He said that he wrote the divorce papers in good faith, but I guess he was trying to show that he was serious about his feelings for his girlfriend. I don't know if the other party would be happy about that, though. After that, I received compensation for the affair and money for the division of property as I had declared. In addition, child support for Tommy was paid in a lump sum because I didn't want to be involved with Ross anymore. Ross was a little reluctant, but thanks to my mother-in-law's condescending attitude toward me, saying, "Give to the poor," the conversation proceeded. I was relieved that Ross and I were now completely cut off from each other. Whatever happens to Ross in the future is irrelevant to me. Then, let's get started. It's not the end of the world if we've broken off our relationship. The show starts now. A few days later, I was at a family restaurant. Ross comes in with light steps. He was dressed up with a scarf around his neck.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
It was not me he approached. It was to the young girl sitting behind me. Despite Ross's smiling face, the girl's face was stiff.
You must be Ross Aniston. You must be dating my daughter. What?
Several men and women stood up from where I was sitting. They all glared at Ross sharply. Ross was surrounded by people he had never met before without knowing why. They were so excited that it looked as if an incident might occur at any moment, but Ross was not a victim. They are the parents of Ross's girlfriend.
How dare you play with my daughter? Well, wait a minute. It's an agreement. It's a consensual relationship. It doesn't matter if it's consensual or not. This girl is just a child.
Ross's flirtatious partner was of an age that adults should not be able to touch. And there was more than one partner. So the parents of the victims colluded and gathered here in force.
No! I seriously love her. Love? My child? Or the other child? Oh, no, this is a committed relationship. I never had any ulterior motives.
The more excuses he made, the deeper he seemed to sink into the mire. The girl's voice leaked out from her mind, gross. Ross seemed to really want to be popular, but of course, to the girl, he was just a convenient uncle who gave her pocket money. Settlement negotiations were immediately held with a lawyer. Ross became small and trembled in little wobbles. It seemed that they had reached an agreement on a fairly large settlement. Her parents left first, leaving Ross alone. Ross looked up at the heavens in a daze. How pathetic his face looked. As he passed by Ross, he said, "Ah. You." He noticed me.
Why are you here?
I'm at a diner. I was just having a meal.
No, you're not. Did you send that blackmailer earlier?
What do you mean? I tilted my head. Ross's eyes, which had looked like a shell of a man, became sharper and sharper. He tried to follow me, but he seemed to have lost his nerve and stumbled on the spot.
Wait.
I was told to wait, but there was no way I was going to wait. I left a smile on his face and left the hapless Ross behind. Ross had promptly paid the settlements to several people. He had also paid quite a bit to me, so there should be no more savings left. However, Ross's father is the president of the company and also a landowner. It might not hurt him to lose this much money. Moreover, Ross has a golden hammer. But that hammer will be useless soon. One morning, Ross's name appeared in a small article in a local newspaper. Ross had been embezzling money from the company. It was a reasonably large company, but the management team was made up of family members. Ross, the next president of the company, must have misunderstood that the company belonged to me and the money belonged to me. Oh, they found out. Ross was a fool, but the family-owned company was also a fool. I've been aware of it for the past 5 years. I had devoted myself to taking care of Ross's personal affairs. I naturally know about affairs and suspicious money movements. I inadvertently brought those documents with me during the divorce, so I sent them to the company out of the kindness of my heart. I don't know if that was the reason Ross was in the predicament he was in, and it didn't matter. A few days later, Ross came to visit me. I was surprised because I thought he had been arrested and was behind bars by now. I heard that Ross's betrayal had enraged his father-in-law, but in the end they made peace and the damage report was withdrawn.
Let's start over. I realize that you are the best.
I prepared myself for the abuse, but instead of abuse, it was a request to get back together.
I can't. You wanted this divorce, didn't you? That's your premature assumption. I love Jennifer.
Nausea rose up in me.
I don't love you.
Don't say that. Ross, smirking, closed the distance between them. Then, a stale smell hit his nose. He bends over and frowns. I'm taking a bath, but I can't seem to get rid of the smell. I take a proper bath, too, but I can't seem to get rid of the smell. I wonder why. When I was with you, I didn't get any nasty looks from other people. Are you harassing me? Is the whole world harassing me? Ross held his body and looked around as if looking for an enemy. Gently holding his nose, he looked at him and saw that the collar neck of his shirt was stained yellow. It looks like he didn't wash it well. I also wondered if he had washed his bath towels and bedclothes. Ross is a sweaty man with a hard body odor, and if he is not careful, he will soon give off an unpleasant smell. He would be such a filthy person if someone did not support him behind the scenes. Unfortunately, there is no vested woman to take care of Ross now, and he has no money to hire a housekeeper. Ross's round, puffy cheeks are wet with tears. As I looked down at his miserable appearance, I gutted in my heart that it was all over. I have been devoted to Ross for the past 5 years, not because I loved him, of course. Nor was it to thank him for providing for me. It was just that I had raised Ross to be a useless person. As a result of my gentle pampering, Ross became a man who could not even prepare his own underwear, yet he became a man of high-mindedness. Even after he had finished eating with a woman at another restaurant, he would happily eat oily food even in the middle of the night because I would prepare only his favorite dishes. Thanks to this, he was on the verge of lifestyle-related diseases. Who would love a useless man with no money and a lot of fat in his body? Now that I am finally financially independent, I don't need Ross anymore. I also took advantage of his weakness, which I had acquired during the time it took me to become independent. You like young girls, don't you? Don't compromise with me.
No, I don't.
Well then, I hope you can go out with a young girl again.
Jennifer, wait. I want you. You're the only one I have. I broke up with the woman because you didn't want me to. I'm also breaking up with my parents who are hard on you. All I want is you. What a stupid man I am to realize how important you are after I lost you. I love you with all my heart, Jennifer.
He's putting up all these beautiful words, but he just got dumped by a woman and disowned by his parents.
Goodbye.
I didn't stop smiling until the end. Ross lost everything. He was on his knees and hands on the ground, making a dirty mewling sound like a buzzard. Oh, it's so ugly, is all I can think. Ross, abandoned even by me, desperately put his head down and somehow tried to return to his in-laws' house. No matter how much trouble he gets into, he is still my adorable only son. My mother-in-law would forgive Ross. But it seems that his parents-in-law could not afford to accept Ross. Jennifer, listen to me. My mother, she's the worst. She was messing with our savings. You cried and lectured me for spending the company's money, but your mother was embezzling the family's money too. I'm a stranger now, but Ross cried to me. He had changed a lot, not only looking good, but also humiliating himself. And even my father. He sold my land without my permission. This and that was our land, and now all that's left is where our house stands. How did they use up all the hundreds of millions of dollars? He said he used it to cover his company's losses. Ross looks sad and lowers his eyes once.
After all, it's all about gambling and playing with women. My mom is old enough to have been paying to a younger man. You've got to be kidding me. She blew all the money I was supposed to get from her. I have nothing left.
Ross's foolish parents were also foolish. Even if I hadn't helped them, they would have blown themselves up someday. Spend money on young women. How could a nearly 80-year-old man be the love interest of a young woman? They were so easily fooled that they didn't even know what they were talking about. What should I do with my missing money? What about my future? I can't even eat these days. It's all over for me. I want you to get back together with poor me. I could see that kind of feeling through him. Poor me, indeed. The whole family only thinks about themselves. There is no way in heaven and earth that I would ever get back together with Ross. He was always persistent, so after that, I made sure not to see him again. Eventually, Ross's company went under and he found out that the president had changed. I don't know who the new president was, but at any rate, it was not Ross. Ross has hit the real bottom and can no longer crawl up, and he is no longer involved with me. Currently, Tommy and I are living together supporting each other. Ross gave us money before he hit rock bottom, and I am working, so I am not worried about the future. It was worth it for me to become financially independent before my divorce from Ross, even if I had to push myself a little too hard. Mom, stay by my side until morning, okay? One night, when Yuki and I got into bed together, he gently held my hand. Because, Mom, you always leave when I fall asleep, don't you? I want you to stay by my side the whole time. I thought she was sleeping soundly, but she knew I was leaving her side. I was finishing up the remaining chores. It doesn't matter if there is a little bit of laundry piled up or if the room is a mess. Even if I don't have a nutritious meal prepared in advance, sometimes even an American dog from a convenience store feels special. Okay. I'll always be with you. Tommy is not looking for perfection. I'm not going to be able to do that. It's so warm. I wonder how long Yuki will sleep holding my hand. His peaceful sleeping face always soothes me.